𝗲𝗂𝗲 have started the marketing campaign for AIPad. Is it going to be the next 1000x cryptocurrency where artificial intelligence and blockchain takes the whole industry to the next level? Today, I'm going to give you my unique insights, having participated in over 100 IDOs over the course of the last 2 years or so. I'm going to show you what really counts so you can protect yourself from the downside and maximize the upside. And at the end of today's video, I'm going to share with you 6 things that you must be aware of if you're doing an IDO launchpad strategy. So if you like today's content, like, subscribe, hit the bell notification. Let's dive straight in. So looking at this, I want to start with the past, like 𝗬𝗍𝗄𝗃. So if you're not familiar with launchpads, it's just a platform that launches new projects. And IDO stands for Initial DEX Offerings, where a coin is launched onto a decentralized exchange for the first time. It's like an IPO, but for cryptocurrency. But what I noticed over the last 2 years is that the performance, if you're doing it from an investment perspective, which is going to be most of you, is really correlated to the price of Bitcoin. I'm going to show you how tightly correlated it is. It's no coincidence. So let's just look at 𝗬𝗍𝗄𝗃, which was the first launchpad launched by 𝗲𝗲𝗲 back in April 2021. And what we're looking at here is the chart of Bitcoin. So I'm going to ask you some questions here because I want you to do some thinking so you can maximize your returns, but also protect yourself from the downside. So if it was launched here, and this is what Bitcoin did. This was the April top. Then it did a nice correction. And then we had the November top. And then we've obviously been in this big bear market right now with this initial surge of price over here. So what do you think the price of Binance Smart Chain Pad, 𝗬𝗍𝗄𝗃, did in this market condition? Well, let's have a look. So looking at this, this was the price behavior. Now, it is uncanny how correlated it is to Bitcoin, because we can do a lot of fundamental analysis when it comes to AIPad, artificial intelligence, blockchain, crypto, where the market is, and so on and so forth. But I like to keep things really simple and see if there's any pattern recognition so we can see what's likely to occur based on what's occurred in the past. So let's just now overlap this on top of a Bitcoin chart. So I want to make this clear because this is really, really important. So Binance Smart Chain Pad launched over here, and we had this surge in price for the April top. And we can see that 𝗬𝗍𝗄𝗃 did quite well in price. It was almost $7 at its peak, right? That was massive. But then crypto and Bitcoin went for a big correction. You can see this dip over here. But look at the price action of a Binance Smart Chain Pad as well. You see the correlation? Then Bitcoin had this April surge, like this, it was around a June to November surge in price. And what happened with 𝗬𝗍𝗄𝗃's price? It also had a nice surge to the upside. And then from November, in Bitcoin's price, we've obviously been in this big downward market, this downward trend. And what happened with 𝗬𝗍𝗄𝗃's price? It moves sideways to down, really, really flattening it out. So do you see the correlation? All right, I'm going to give you a few more examples, but it's really important that you get familiar with how crypto operates. It's very seasonal. And if we're in a bull market, if it's a clear bull market, that's going to dictate performance. So we're going to look at this part of the market itself. So we're going to look at this part of the market towards the end of this video. So we can see AIPad's probably going to launch somewhere over here in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to show you what I've noticed as patterns in terms of 𝗲𝗲𝗲's marketing strategy, which is very, very powerful. By the way, if you want to learn how to read the markets like a pro, I've actually created a 4 secrets masterclass because we're going to break down one of the 4 secrets today to leverage what's likely happening with Bitcoin, which will give us a massive indication on how AIPad is likely to perform. Is it going to do 1000x? Is it going to do 10x? Or is it just going to tank? But we can look at that information using this. So if you're new to analyzing Bitcoin, check this masterclass out. It's free, it's in the link below. So let's now look at another example. So 𝗲𝗲𝗲 launched another launchpad for the metaverse called 𝗓𝗡𝗍𝗄𝗃. A lot of hype, massive spike in price, but what did it do? Well, let's first look at the price of Bitcoin in context and in relation to when 𝗓𝗡𝗍𝗄𝗃 was launched. So 𝗓𝗡𝗍𝗄𝗃 was launched in first 2 weeks of December, right? So this is December over here. This is the November top. Now, at the time of the launch, no one really knew. I mean, we had a inclination of what was likely to happen with Bitcoin's price, but no one really knew that this was going to happen, right? To this deep of a correction. So when this was launched, a lot of people thought the market was going to continue to surge up. And if it did, that would have impacted how 𝗜𝗂𝗲𝗏 performed. But now we can see that Bitcoin's price went up, it went down, it went up, and then it really went down, it went up, and then it just continued down. How do you think 𝗜𝗂𝗏𝗏 performed as just price? Just price, right? Just forget about IDOs and how many projects it launched, etc. How did the price perform in these market conditions? Well, if it's correlated, you can probably guess. Well, look how the price performed. It had a little surge in price. It actually did pretty much 1,000x, from the IDO price. But you can see it had this surge, it peaked, and then it was just pretty much sideways to down, and it just flattened out. So now let's just overlap this onto Bitcoin's price, and we can see it really, really clearly. So hopefully you can see this clearly in the correlation. Because look, IDOs can be a fantastic strategy of getting 100x, 200x, 1,000x. But I'm going to share with you at the end of today's video the 6 things that you must be aware of that newbies are never aware of, because it's not obvious and it's not intuitive. And you want to be like literally eyes open before committing your money, so you know what you're getting into. But when we look at Bitcoin's price, we can see you have an up movement and a down movement. But then with 𝗜𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏, if I just change the color to blue, the price was literally from over here, it had this peak, and then it just went down, 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 down. And if you look at the overall trend with Bitcoin, it was pretty much down, right? So 𝗜𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏 didn't have much hope, right? In hindsight, at the time, if Bitcoin had a surge in price and made an all-time new high above the November high, it would have been a different ballpark, a different game. And that's really, really important to understand. So is this making sense to you? Knowing the correlation between how Bitcoin is performing, which really reflects the market condition that we're in, and how AIPad is likely to perform. So we're going to go into a bit of detail. But before we do, I want to give you one more example. Let's go for one more example, and it's 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. So 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, so you can kind of get the gist, right? 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 are phenomenal at marketing. They're phenomenal. Right? It's just, especially if they hit the market conditions. And 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 was no exception. It was a launch pad for the Tron blockchain. They did find in hindsight that there weren't much popularity in terms of the Tron blockchain for building IDOs. So they changed a few things. But if we just keep it into the context on how did the price of the token on 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 perform, and if we look at how Bitcoin performed from when it was launched. So 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 was launched, I believe it was June 2021. Which was around here. And we can see Bitcoin had a nice little surge in price, and then it tanked over here. And, people were really fearful of the market testing this low over here. So you can probably guess what happened to 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. But then from June, we had this surge to the November high. So you can probably guess what happened with 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. We're going to see in a second. And then obviously, as you know, we've been in a big correction with Bitcoin since. So how do you think 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 performed based on Bitcoin price? And hopefully you're seeing the correlation now, because this is going to help us analyze what's likely to occur with the price of AIPad. Well, this is 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, right? It had a massive surge. I think it did like a 500x. Even BitBoy, I think, did a video on 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, and it just surged. It was a 250x. I think it was 250x that it did at the time. But then it had this dip. And we did a lot of video and content on 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 because we knew it was undervalued and Bitcoin was likely to surge, and it did. And 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 followed suit. And then from the November top, you can see it's highly correlated. It's just been sideways to down. And now 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏's been pretty much wound down, and people were able to transfer over to Polypad, which was a launch pad for the Polygon blockchain. So let's just now overlap this chart on top of Bitcoin, and just so you can see the correlation. So you can see this really, really clearly. Hopefully you can see it clearly, because this is going to give you a unique insight, because I participated in over 100 IDOs, and I really like this strategy, but there is a lot of work, a lot of admin. There's a lot of release dates. I'm going to go over the 6 things that you must be aware of at the end of this video, but let's just look at this. So Bitcoin's price went down, Trump had tanked, like it tanked, right? And most of the tokens were locked, right? When you first got into this, 90% of the tokens were locked, and it has a monthly release rate, which I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail. But then Bitcoin had this nice surge, and look what happened with Trump's price surge, right? It's almost just identical. Then Bitcoin, as you know, has had a nice deep correction. I use the word nice, candidly, but then Trump had also to the downside. So is the correlation making sense? That hopefully this is giving you an insight that you're not going to see by yourself, because there's going to be a lot of hype. There's going to be a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out. There's going to be a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So you want to really have your eyes wide open so you can really see what the reality is as opposed to the hype, because the hype is going to be big, right? Especially with the way they're marketing it in the sense of artificial intelligence. There's a lot of things happening in the world right now where the world is moving, but it's so early. I would lean much more on Bitcoin. I'll just go, what is Bitcoin doing? And that's likely to be reflected. And we can see that with BSEPad, with MetaPad, or 𝗜𝗱𝗲𝗶, with TrumpPad. If we go through all of them, there's like 15 launch pads. All of them have a very high correlation to the price of Bitcoin. So now let's just really ask ourselves the question, because the big question is, all right, if that's the case, what is Bitcoin likely to do over the next 4 to 6 weeks, 1 to 6 months, maybe even 12 months and beyond? Because if we can see that, that will really tell us how AIPad is likely to perform more than anything else, more than the fundamentals, more than AI, more than just what crypto is going to do for the world long term. Literally short term, like we're talking about less than 3 months, how to become risk free, how to protect your capital, and have some of your money in there for aggressive growth. Because a lot of people make money with IDOs, and a lot of people lose money with IDOs because it's a zero-sum game. And we're going to cover some of those things when I cover the 6 things that you must be aware of. So AIPad, right? So when we're looking at this, let's look at Bitcoin's chart right now. So I've just taken a snapshot of Bitcoin. What I've noticed with 𝗬𝗲𝗍 is when they start marketing a new launchpad, it's normally released within 2 weeks. Normally the case, as long as the market conditions are looking favorable, right? So they're smart guys. They have done some incredible things, but we are still in a bear market. So when we're looking at this, or when I'm looking at this, what I want you to think about is obviously we've had this surge in Bitcoin recently. So I'm not too surprised that now is the time that something's being launched, because marketing is key, right? If a IDO doesn't do well on launch, then it can die, right? And that's important. So that's why there's very few IDOs released during these kind of market conditions and these kind of market conditions, because they just don't perform as well. And people sometimes reflect the strength of the project or the value of the project based on the price, which is not always directly correlated. Sometimes it's just marketing and timing. So we're going to look at this. We're going to look at this knowing that AIPad is probably going to be launched within the next 2 weeks or so. I don't think we've got a fixed date at the moment or a hard date. So before I cover Bitcoin, well, in fact, let's just do some high-level analysis first, right? Markets tend to move in 5s and 3s. I covered this in the Masterclass, which I highly encourage that you take, because if you can read the price of Bitcoin, it will give you an insight into the market that no fundamental analysis will really give you, because the fundamentals are baked into the price. So markets tend to move in 5s and 3s. And looking at the recent price action of Bitcoin, what seems to be happening right now, and again, we can only identify the high probability outcome. No one knows for certain. That's important. That's really, really important. So even when I'm doing this analysis, it's with a question mark, because no one knows, and only hindsight will tell us. So we've had this move down from November, which looks like the initial move down, which is what looks like to be a wave 1. We had this A, B, C correction. Markets tend to correct in a 3-wave structure more often than not, which is like a wave 2. We had the next move down, which is quite aggressive. And then we've had this unusual movement on Bitcoin, which was this here, 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 and here, right? And markets don't tend to complete in a 3-wave structure in terms of this 3-wave structure over here. So to me, this looks like an irregular correction. It's called an A, B, C correction. So I'm anticipating that Bitcoin is likely to go to between 28,000 and 31,000. I'm going to talk about that in a bit more detail in a second. But then possibly is going to do a further correction to the downside. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it's got a high probability. But what's going to really impact AIPad is really the next 6 weeks. What is the next 6 weeks likely to be like as opposed to the next 6 months? Because when it's launched, the current market conditions is going to be what's most important. And that's what you really want to pay special attention to. So now let's just dive into a bit more detail over here. So I've just zoomed out. One of the most common things that traders tend to use is support and resistance. And when we're looking at Bitcoin, we can see that it had this support over here, the support over here, the support and resistance over here. And we seem to be in that zone or coming up to that zone, which is also the 28,000 to 31,000 range. So we want to be aware of that over the coming 6 weeks. And again, I'm going to show you why in a bit more depth. So if you want to learn, by the way, how to read the markets, one of the 4 secrets is Elliott waves, which is how to know fear and greed, how it typically plays out, how crowd psychology typically plays out, and how the fundamentals are already baked into the price. So you can have a nice simple overview of the market and know when to buy, when to sell. But even if you're doing IDO strategies, it's very helpful to know what the market is very likely to do, so you can stack the odds in your favor, knowing when to become risk-free, when to be locking in profits, and when to just stand aside and go, do you know what, it's too high a risk as well. This is free, it's in the link below, check it out. So now let's just zoom in a bit more, because we're going to finish on a few more things. AIPad, how is it likely to perform? My take, is it going to do 1,000x? Is it going to do a 10x? Is it going to do 100x? Well, no one ultimately knows, right? So it is high risk. However, there's a few things that we can know and do know. And one of them is the recent price behavior of Bitcoin. Looking at what it's done, especially over the last week, it looks like it's had a nice little surge over here, which looks like typical wave 1, a wave 2. At this point, we weren't sure what it was going to do, like if it was going to do a deeper correction or if it was going to surge to the upside. But now we've had this bigger surge to the upside. This looks like the typical wave 3. So over the next 4 to 6 weeks, it's likely that Bitcoin is going to go beyond 28,000 towards the 31,000 range. So we want to be aware of this. So if Bitcoin does do this, that is a really positive sign for AIPad. And again, nothing to do with AIPad. Well, it is and it isn't, because again, Bitcoin is like the daddy. And what daddy does, the children follow. And all the altcoins are children, especially the low caps and IDOs. So a part of this game, so to speak, of buying and selling cryptocurrency, whether it's IDOs or whether it's low caps, whether it's a top 10 cryptocurrency, most of it is timing. If you buy in the right time, you can buy something bad at the right time and make a lot of money. You can buy the best thing in the wrong time in terms of the market is moving down and you'll lose money. So it's much simpler than you think. And there's actually not as much intelligence involved. It's actually timing, pattern recognition, and a few other factors. So let's finish today with the 6 things that you need to be aware of when it comes to launchpads and IDOs, because AIPad will be launched as an IDO as far as I'm aware. Now, I've participated in many launchpads, almost all of 𝗓𝗲𝗄's launchpads, especially in the peak seasons. Peak seasons being March, April 2021, moving up to the June, going towards November, especially that's where the 500x's, 200x's, and the 1000x's were occurring. But then also when the market is down, how it performs is very, very different. So the first thing is the lock-in periods. So when you buy your launchpad, so you're going to have to buy one of the launchpads if you haven't already got one, whether it's Binance Smart Chain Pad, whether it's MetaVPad, GameZone, PulsePad, Polypad. There's quite a few different choices. Make sure you understand the staking requirements. Some of them you can unstake your coins straight away when you want to participate and sell them. Others, there's penalties. If you unstake within the first 2 weeks, there's like a 20% penalty and so on and so forth. Just know that there are penalties and there's lock-in periods. The second thing is that you want to be aware of is the vesting schedules with the IDO. So for instance, with MetaVPad, if you participated in the IDO, you would have achieved a 1000x, right? So the token price went up by 1000x from its IDO price to its peak. However, and there is a big however, you only had access to 10% of your tokens upon listing. Go 10%? Well, why? Well, the other 90% were locked and they get released on a monthly schedule or on a linear vesting schedule. Monthly means on a fixed date, another 10% is unlocked. Linear means literally every day, or sometimes even by the minute. It's just released slowly over a 9-12 month period, sometimes a 3-month period. So again, approximately, depending on the IDO itself, and once it's launched or pre-launch, it will tell you the information. Just be very aware that you're not going to have access to 100% of your tokens. That also means if AIPad is launching IDOs, you will only have 10% of your tokens towards your pad membership, which means you're likely going to have to buy some extra AIPad tokens if you want to participate in AIPad. Right? So there's all these little nuances that you just want to be aware of. The release schedule, it varies from project to project. Some is 3 months, some is 18 months, some have been 24 months, but the typical was between 3 and 12 months. Some were 9 months, some were 6 months. And again, sometimes the initial release is 20%, 25%, 10%, 5%. Again, every project is unique, but just know there is a lock-in period and a vesting schedule. All right, the third thing you want to be aware of is the launchpad price volatility. It will have massive ups and downs, and that will cause you emotional turmoil, because if you want to participate in the IDOs, you need to hold on to your membership. However, there'll be times your membership is worth 10 times more than what you paid for it. There'll be times it's worth 70% less than what you paid for it. So you just have to get comfortable with that cycle and bake it into your plan from the very beginning. Either you just ignore the price and you go, I want to participate in 100 IDOs and wait till Bitcoin hits an all-time new high, or you can buy some extra tokens for the launchpad. Wait till it does a 3x, if it does a 3x, and then sell those so you cover your cost, so you can bake that into your business plan. But just know, like you saw with Binance Smart Chain Pad, BSC Pad, Trump Pad, Meta V Pad, the price is very volatile and highly correlated to what Bitcoin is doing. Very important. So important because most people don't understand that simple concept and get burnt. And a lot of people make a lot of money and a lot of people lose a lot of money in IDOs because it is a high risk, high reward strategy. IDOs themselves are going to have massive volatility. So let's just say you participate in 5 IDOs. Again, upon launch, if it's marketed well and the market conditions are right, sometimes do 100x. But then over the coming weeks and months, it can drop down to maybe a 10x. So it goes from 100x to a 10x. In other words, it drops by 90%, and then it could make another all-time new high and then drop down again. So it's very volatile. It's not solid. So just be aware of that. And again, a lot of your profits are going to be on paper because 90%, 80% of your tokens are going to be locked. So even if it does a 500x, you're only going to be able to activate or sell 10% of those, right? Really, really important. Hopefully that's coming across because these are some of the nuances that you just want to be aware of. And by the way, one of the reasons I'm doing this video, I'm noticing my community is talking a lot about AIPad, and I'm like, okay, just remember that this thing is very volatile. So you have to kind of just take everything with a pinch of salt. As you've seen today, hopefully you've seen today, the fifth thing you want to be aware of is it's very seasonal on 2 things. One, on performance. If you buy an average IDO at the right time, man, you get 100x, 200x, 50x, sometimes a 500x. If you buy the best project launching as an IDO, but during a downward market, nah, good luck. It's not gonna work. Also know the volume of IDOs. In peak season, it's like an IDO a day. There's like 5 a week. Just IDO. In a bear market, you're barely getting 1 every 2 months, 1 every 3 months, right? So the performance and the quantity, very seasonal. So in euphoria phase of the market, again, you're going to perform better, they're going to perform better, and the volume of IDOs, so you're going to get more value for your membership. So sometimes it's better to buy if you're doing launchpads, your membership in the worst market conditions because you'll get them very, very cheap. But no, the performance will be very poor in comparison to peak market conditions and the quantity of IDOs. And just as a side note on this, it's a zero-sum game. All markets are a zero-sum game or even a minus-sum game, meaning for there to be winners, there must be losers. The money has to come from somewhere. So you're competing against others. And then there's fees baked in. There's gas fees. Sometimes the tokenomics is there's an extra 5% fee on selling your tokens and so on and so forth. So just know that it's a competitive game. And if you don't know what you're doing, it's hard to win the game. So just know some of these factors. And then last but not least, IDOs themselves, initial DEX offerings, are companies that are startups. And startups, even outside of crypto and outside of IDOs, are very high risk in general. And IDOs themselves are also high risk, meaning that the survival rate, going through boom and bust cycles and bull and bear markets, not all of them are going to survive. That's just natural with all business models and all businesses. And IDOs, the thing that's unique about them is normally you can't get into like early stage companies as an investor outside of IDOs. You normally have to be a high net worth individual and invest in IPOs. So IDOs, you can get in very, very early, but just know that it's a vision and they haven't got much proven. So AIPad is a vision. They got a track record as in 𝗬𝗲𝗲 with other launch pads, but it's still a startup. But when they start launching projects as IDOs on the launch pad themselves, they are also startups as well. So 6 things, make sure you're aware of these. Make sure you take the masterclass below. It's free, but it allows you to read the price of Bitcoin. Now, you will never know for certain what's going to happen, but likelihood is it's going to correlate. So now let's just finish with what is likely to happen with AIPad, my final summary. Well, if Bitcoin does do this and goes between the range of 28,000 and 31,000, I reckon AIPad will probably do a 50x or 100x. Don't know if it'll do a 1,000x, because 1,000x was like when crazy market conditions. It was like the peak of the market. Right now, this is the initial move up of Bitcoin, and the bull market hasn't been confirmed yet. And it's likely, if then the market in February, March does do another movement to the downside and goes below this point over here, down towards the 14,000, 12,000, that will also be reflected in the price and the performance. So there you have it. Like, subscribe, hit the bell notification. Let's finish with a quote from my book, which you can also now download for free. Send the link below. Massive value in this book. But I want to finish on chapter 5 with this quote. It's from Leonardo da Vinci. And hopefully this came across in today's video, because there's going to be a lot of information. There's going to be a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out. There's going to be a lot of just hype. That's what marketing is, right? It's going to be a lot of hype, and Bluesy are fantastic at doing it. But if you don't have a plan, long term, it's hard to win in this game. But if you have a plan, then you can do incredibly well. So Leonardo da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication.